I'm Chantal with Growing Up Without Borders. Today we are going to quickly connect with someone over in Ontario, Canada. We are going to connect with Peter Noce. He runs a really cool podcast called the Sill podcast. And well, without further ado, let's quickly connect and see how he's doing over there during the coronavirus times. Thanks for joining me here today, Peter, all the way from Ontario, Canada.
My pleasure.
And I listened to some of your podcasts and one of the recent ones that you just did with just a discussion of the whole coronavirus and everything. And there was different ways of thinking about it, I guess you could say, different approach to the way we look at it as a whole and the way it's affecting society and such like that. So I wanted to basically just pick your brain today and find out a little bit more. And especially since you've probably did that recording was already a few days, and because this is changing rapidly every day,
yes,
in countries, it's quite changing, including in Ontario, where they are having some of the nursing homes now affected, some of the nurses affected by this. And so, yes, please share with us some of your insight, your thoughts, and especially from a perspective of there in Ontario, and then we'll go into.
Well, we seem to have things pretty much under control in terms of relative to, for example, our neighbors to the south. Right now, we haven't been hit anywhere near as hard. Of course, it's early in the game. As you mentioned in the podcast that we did, yes, we recorded it on March 19th. So by the time we posted it on March 30th, we were into a whole other world. None of it, I mean, from my perspective, because I've been following this very closely since the beginning of February, there haven't been any real surprises for me in terms of numbers, only because I've been tracking it for that long. I created my own spreadsheet and punch in my own numbers daily. In fact, I have a number of people that now receive that just because they want the information. All it is an amalgamation of information. Sorry, go ahead.
Is that something they can just get from your website?
Yeah, they can get it online through many sources. All I've done is I've taken a bunch of information, put it into one sheet. None of the information that I have is created by me. It's just information that is organized by me.
Sure.
In any case, back to your question about the situation here. Obviously, our numbers are beginning to grow as well. And being in Ontario, Ontario is one of the primary regions, of course, especially the GTA,
yes,
where all the concentration of people is. 1 in 6 Canadians lives within 100 kilometers of Toronto, so none more has to be said than that.
Yes.
I guess at this point, I would just answer specific questions from you, because it's such a broad area to discuss that I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Sure. So one of the things that you were talking about earlier with the recording that you did was about how it is basically impacting people in general, their way of lifestyle, what they're doing at home, and a different way to look at it. Like you were talking about Netflix, for example, people consuming so much Netflix that it's kind of overloading the system, but there's so much good that could come out of just being home, and almost like, I call it like a reset button. I feel like there's a reset on Mother Nature, there's a reset on homes, people learning to get along together in a home. There's a reset button on how are we going to work from home or make a living potentially from home, homeschooling, There's all these different things going on. I mean, it's really pulling the carpet from underneath people's feet, literally, and really giving time for people to contemplate and think of things. So yeah, if you just want to.
I'm in 100% agreement. And as you probably, if you did listen to the last podcast, which was on COVID-19 tragedy or opportunity, which was the title, I think if you listen to it, you would have seen that I come from the side more of opportunity than I do tragedy.
Yes.
I mean, the losses are obvious. There's no question this is a horrible thing. I feel for the people that, actually I feel more for the people who have lost loved ones, because the ones that have died, they're not feeling any pain. But for the losses, it's horrific. However, in the midst of all that, as I mentioned in the podcast as well, I'm not all that surprised by what's happening. I am surprised with the speed. I am surprised with the way it hit us so quickly. But for many years now, I've been expecting something to give. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, have you been expecting something because you're listening to maybe Bill Gates and such, or are you coming more from the conspiracy theorists that think like,
Neither actually, because I'm not even talking about just the virus. It
okay,
came in this form. I just think we've been carrying excesses for some time in terms of environmental, in terms of financial markets and so on, the disparity of wealth. There are a number of things that are happening.
mm-hmm.
And it's almost like no one's really paying attention to certain things. We keep always going to the economy, the economy, the economy, the economy. And it's almost like we're foregoing people at times. And this is in the environmental area with climate change and so on. So to me, this is like, it's almost like this little invisible thing, microscopic, and it's yielding more power than all the governments and armies combined.
Isn't that wild? It's true, isn't it? Something that can put the whole world to a halt, complete standstill,
Yes,
and change
but
everything.
it has. And the longer it goes on, I think the more difficult it's going to be to go back to the way we were.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. I don't want to use the word fearful or anxiety, but those are things that can easily set in when you start to come to the realization of how drastic it's changing things. And especially in our case, in the travel industry, when will countries
Yes.
open up? When will people
Mm-hmm.
be able to start
Mm-hmm.
moving around? All those things. That's huge. And so many countries rely on travel and tourism heavily.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I'm so heartbroken, and it's really hard to not let it affect you for some of the places we've just recently been. So when we were in Cambodia, we could see the difference from when we first arrived to no tourist within a short
Mm-hmm.
amount of time. And all those people who are now unemployed because there's no tourists, and that's what they live off of. And they don't have the social programs. Canada is an amazing country when it comes to socialization of helpful programs and stuff like that. And many of the countries, whether it be New Zealand, of course, they're amazing as well. But there's a lot of countries out there that don't have that and don't have the aid that they're going to need. India, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
my heart goes out because we know people in all those places and they are
Right.
personally affected by it. So it's hard for me. It's great to talk about opportunity and such. And yes, I think there's a lot of opportunity in it, but it's hard to also balance the I guess the realization of what is happening.
Yeah, there are two sides to this equation, and depending on which side of the equation you're on, that's the one that's going to impact you, or the one that you're going to feel the most.
That's right.
And
And it's almost
but
like, the whole saying of what you feed will grow, right? And so you have to
yes,
think on positive things and all those things. And you have to really, get a grasp of that. But us also, I have to also realize what's really happening and not be putting my head in the sand, if you will, right?
yeah, and one of the things you just said though is a perfect example of depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on. So, for example, you talked about the tourism industry and the tremendous loss. I mean, because it's the wide effect of this, not the singular thing. It's all the things that are connected. This is also really demonstrating our connectedness on so many levels, not just personal, industry, everything, economies, politics, all of it. But there's also a situation, I shouldn't say but, and in that particular example of tourism, you're also, have you looked at the satellite pictures of what's happening over the areas where all this air traffic and vehicular traffic has stopped?
Mm-hmm.
The air is being cleaned up rapidly.
100%. And
Right?
the smog is disappearing and everything is becoming alive again and animals are coming back and all of that. Of course, it's beautiful. And it would almost be amazing if every year we could put this like reset button where everybody just stops for a whole month and everyone stays in in the
Well,
world.
you know what, that, in a way though, yeah, but in a way that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, it's about stopping, listening, as you said, reset. I think this is a situation where this is now being imposed because we weren't listening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does.
Now I know there's different schools of thought on this. I know that, but that's my own particular feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost like a, if you will, Mother Nature crying out and forcing something, you know.
Well, that's how I see this whole thing. I see this whole thing as a manifestation of nature.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as I mentioned in the podcast, I think mankind in many ways has become arrogant. You know, we think that we can shape everything. We think we can control everything. You know, we can dam rivers. We can, you know, do whatever we need to do in order to serve us. I mean, even this thing, if you want to take it to a particular detail, even the situation with the virus, which ultimately a lot of these viruses come from animals
Yeah.
or our association with our vicinity to animals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the animals have always been there and they've always had their particular areas. We've domesticated them. We've used them for our purposes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily what nature intended, but that's what we've done. And so at some point there is a consequence to that. You know, if you deforest the Amazon, you're dislocating species, you're hurting the environment. At some point something has to give, because nature doesn't have any emotions.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for sure. It's exactly that. It's almost like there's a lot of people. I have dear friends, and it's really hard to have the balance, because where we're right now in Switzerland, a lot of people are very ecologically savvy, friendly, knowledgeable, and it's almost shunned upon for people to travel. Like, why would you need to travel to Thailand when we have beautiful things in our own backyard that won't cause all the emissions and stuff like that? And I mean, this is what we do. We travel all the time. And, but I must say, we probably use less emissions than most people do because we work from home. So we're not doing a back, forth. But when you're talking about a country like Switzerland, people take public transit, they take the trains. They are very ecologically aware and friendly of their environment, other than, you know, and then you can see the complete opposite in countries like the United States, where it's just, you know, there's a bit of division, or there's a lot of division in the United States, but I mean, there's a lot of areas of the United States who are completely not really aware of that, right? And they don't really, it doesn't really even affect them, or they maybe just don't know, you know? So
yes, and part of the irony there is that this is it's not even arguable. It's the wealthiest nation on earth, probably access to more resources than any other country in the world, should be leading on every level pretty much, despite the rise of the East, which is considerable, but the US is still considered the world power. The irony of all this is that they're probably going to have the hardest struggle of all nations with this particular virus.
yeah,
Because in many ways, they've become victims of their own power. The freedom that they want, the consumer society, all these things, which also makes it more difficult to control these situations, because telling someone who's wielding a rifle that they can't go out, you know,
yeah.
I use the phrase in the podcast, you know, weaponize before you rationalize. You know, there's these kinds of things that are going on, which would make it more difficult. I'm hoping they pull it together because, as you know, there are two Americas.
That's right.
So you can't, it's not, I don't like putting all of America into one particular definition. But their very strengths have become their Achilles heel.
Yeah, wow. That's a good way to look at it. I'm very,
Well, that's just my view, of course.
yeah, no, I'm concerned with what's going to happen there because of their way of thinking freedom. And in this case, you know, the way the governments are getting control and stopping the spread of this virus is by having government control, is by having tracking of cell phones, is by having, you know, what is it called when the military are in power? It's by having that is stopping the spread and saving lives. But you've got, like you said, the a group of people in the United States that they want their freedom at all costs, and they don't want that to happen. And of course, they don't want the government to have control. Nobody wants the government to have control over everything like that and be tracked and all that. But literally, this is what's happening and stopping the spread. So
yes, but they've got some great people. I really like Dr. Fauci, and you know, Cuomo's having his say as well. I mean, people are getting the idea, getting to the core of things, and people are becoming more important, because that's really what we're talking about here is the balance of people people's lives versus the economy, you know, and where do you draw the line?
Yeah,
I think that's what it's become here. I don't know that it's not in the rest of the world. The rest of the world, and I shouldn't say the rest of the world, but let's take even the European nations. The thinking is a little bit different, even though it's capitalistic as well, but it's a little bit more moderate. There's more of that socialistic or social element.
Absolutely.
And I think even that word socialism, I think it's going to be redefined by this virus, to be honest. But again, these are just my opinions.
I know we all have opinions and we all have thoughts and we all have lots of questions, as certainly I do, with regards to what is the economical impact versus the amount of saving lives. You know, when you think of a war, you know, they always say, okay, well, X amount of men are going to die, but it's for this reason. There's never a good reason for war, but you know, I'm just using this example.
Yes.
And it's the same thing. Okay, so what is the economical impact of what's going to happen to society? How many people are going to struggle and lose maybe even loved ones from suicide or crazy other things that are going to happen because of that, versus the amount of people that are going to die? And you know, you look at, I don't know if you're following what's happening in Sweden. I'm not, but I just know that they're not on lockdown, and the neighboring.
That's right, they're not. The children are in school.
Right. So
right.
I don't understand that. I don't understand how that it could be. And I'm really interested to see, I don't know if you maybe have some light on some of those numbers, but what's happening there compared to
Well, their numbers are no worse. In fact, in many ways, they're better. I think it's still too early to call a lot of things. I'm not an expert. I can only give you my own particular view on it.
And it could just be very well that they will get hit, but it takes that incubation time. Like Switzerland, for example, they're expecting a wave in about 1.5 weeks or so, because it takes that much time for, you know, the spreadability and the infection to take place in people's bodies, essentially. So,
well, really, what this is about is it's about not overloading the medical side of things, hospitals, and the ability of staff and medical people to address the cases that are there.
Yeah.
Because no matter what happens here, the virus has to play itself out. No matter what we do, you know, this has happened many times before in history, and it will happen again. So it's right now. It's about not overloading the system. Ultimately, it still has to run through the country and the world and do its thing. We have to build an immunity to it. I mean, they can talk about vaccines and all that, and I'm sure at some point that's going to be addressed. But before that happens, I mean, look where we are now. I mean, if we just take the US alone, 3 weeks ago, they had literally no cases. As we're speaking right now, there are over 200,000 and approaching 5,000 fatalities. I mean, so, you know, to me, this whole panic thing, you need to address it, but it's not good to panic. That will never solve anything. If anything, it'll make it worse, because what's happening is, as people are more stressed and anxious, they're actually working against their own immune systems. They're weakening their immune systems.
So how would you prevent that, though, in the middle of all of this? That's hard. It's a hard one, right? Because
very, and I don't have the answers, but I know where I would begin. I would begin with leadership and the ability of leaders to calm a situation, which means, in my opinion, being transparent, at the same time saying we can work with this. We need to work together. In other words, don't press the panic button as much as you do the honesty button. Situation is creating, by its very nature, it's an extremely adverse situation. And when you have adverse situations, you bring out the worst and the best in everything. So you're really seeing this elevation of human spirit. At the same time, you're seeing where the weaknesses are. You know, does it matter that you have, you know, 40, 50 million people without health care? Right?
Yeah.
Does it matter that, you know, in this particular situation, no amount of rockets and atomic bombs or whatever else, however else you want to approach it, is going to solve the issue?
That's
right.
You know,
countries have to figure out a way to work together. Now, some people will say, you know, well, you know, this is over, it's going to go back to the way it was. I would say that if it happens to end very quickly, the likelihood of that is greater. But I think the longer this goes on, the more people are going to have to reflect on what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, people being at home, reconnecting with their children. At first, it may not go that way. And, there might be a lot of divorces because of this, not to mention domestic violence. There's so many things that this can really exacerbate.
Yeah.
But on the other side, think of all the positive things that can happen about people reconnecting, getting back in touch with who they are. And, it's very revealing. I mean, I'm sure even in your own household, you're learning different things about your own partner,
Yeah.
even the way you think and how you interact with your children, and your children get to see a different side of you too. And I want to make this one comment, if I may, on this video, is that for all the people, for the millions of people that are sitting home with their children, if there was ever a time for a parent or parents to give their kids a base and to show them, a level of composure or confidence, this is it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Anyway.
And also, I was talking with my kids because I feel fortunate that I have obedient children and they're with me all the time. So it's maybe easier to snip things, if you will, in the butt before they become big, where a lot of parents, maybe they just let it go. They go off to school, they're busy with their sports, and they don't really have that time to deal with underlying things that might be happening in a household. And now that they're all together, if a child isn't listening, or they aren't obeying their parents, or they're acting like a teenager, or what have you, whatever happens, the parents have the time now to deal with that and to put things in place. They're still the leaders of the home, and they can still raise their children the way they should be raised.
Excuse me.
And I think a lot of good will come out of this as well. And like you said in the beginning, that's going to be really rough, but in the end, that family structure will probably be a lot stronger.
And there's something else that I strongly believe in that I think you'll see come to play as well, is I'm of the opinion that governments reflect their people rather than the other way around.
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Huh.
Well, it's the way I've always seen it, simply because, we ultimately elect whoever it is that governs us. At least that's the way it's supposed to be in a democracy. So to me, even the absence of is a reflection of the society. So if you're not involved, if you're not participating, if you're not voting, whatever the situation is, again, I'm not making any judgments here. I'm just looking at it from my own overview. Mm-hmm. So if a government or even corporations, same thing, to blame a corporation for providing you with something that you ultimately want, whether they've sold it to you or not, to me is a waste of energy. If you want to change something, you have to change first.
Yes, right? But people need the knowledge first. And I think a lot of people are blinded by the fact. You can take, for example, the United States versus many other countries. I forget what percentage of food is just banned in other countries and it's completely available in the United States. Well, people don't realize that, or if they realize, it almost takes a war or something against it. Like the people, like you said, need to speak up and demand change for there to be a change. But if they don't know, it's hurting them.
Right. So I'll give you a very small phrase and extremely simplistic.
Okay.
People before profits, or profits before people. So how has this changed your current situation, and what do you see going forward?
Well, this is interesting because I wish I could foresee the future, because I feel that this might go on a lot longer than we're all expecting it to. And I don't want that, and I don't want to think that way, but that is the ultimate realization, that this is the way it might be, right? And it will affect travel. And how many businesses that are in the travel industry and the travel sector might not be able to, however long they're going to have to live it out. What if they don't have those programs in place to help them out? And then will they have to close their businesses? What does that mean for them? All of that, right? And then for us as a family, it's changed everything, because, we're at a standstill, right? We have loads and loads of content to pump out. So I'm not worried about getting some of the work done. And this is a great opportunity for us, because we don't sit still. For us, it's amazing. It's just so nice to not move and move and move and move and move. It's a break for us from our normal hustle bustle of travel.
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to go for. I don't know how long and when will countries start to accept people back in without imposing 14 or more days of quarantine? Because if everything settles in one country, well, the other countries
Excuse me.
that are still infected, they can't come in. So that really puts a halt on world travel in a whole, right?
So specifically, you've got three daughters,
Yes.
different ages. Are they all experiencing it differently?
No, no, they're loving it in a sense that we get up, we do a little routine, we have a workout, they bake, they do their schoolwork, they help with the video edits, and we go for a little walk. So it's almost like they have their home back, a home lifestyle of
Hmm.
routine that they don't usually have when we travel, and so they're really enjoying this time. And we keep them sheltered a little bit from somewhat from the news and try not to focus on the negative of it so it doesn't
Right.
impact them too much. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's a no small part to you and Tyler as well, because I'm sure that you're fairly composed. I'm sure you have your moments, and
Hmm.
I'm sure when the children are asleep, you have other moments. But a concern as well.
Hmm.
But that's what I mentioned early on in this conversation about how important it is now for parents, because parents are essentially in the leadership role, and this is an example that extends to governments and institutions.
Hmm.
It's really, really important now more than ever for the people that head things to keep their head on straight, and it's increasingly difficult to do that, but it's
100%.
even more important to do so.
Yeah, you're right. Right. So if you were to give some words of wisdom or advice or something like that, what is something that you'd like to share with people?
First of all, I don't give advice. I'll give you ideas. I, I, I wouldn't know what to advise anyone other than, I still always go to some very basic principles.
Okay.
Kindness, just kindness. If you're angry at things, take time out if you can. Remember that most things that we concern ourselves with day to day aren't really that critical or that important. What's important is connections. Everything you've talked about is about community, and it's about people interacting with people and understanding. And if this virus doesn't demonstrate this, we're really all on equal ground in many, many ways. So that's what I would take from this. I would take this as real basic stuff: kindness, love, caring, and also a little bit of common sense, if I can say that. Not going into panic mode, which is easier said than done, but that's what I would suggest. And try to look at things differently. So when you do feel yourself in either a depressive state, or like you mentioned, if the news is getting you down, turn it off.
Yeah.
But for those people, there are people like myself who can watch certain things and not experience that same kind of down period. It's equally important to understand those people too, because you got to get your information from somewhere. So
That's
if
right.
you want to tune out, tune out. It's really about getting to understand yourself,
Mhm.
and then dealing with that. Other than that, I don't know that I would advise anybody anything, because I don't know enough
Right.
about them
No,
and
but
their
that's
life
good.
to.
Yeah. That's good though. It's good for people to hear that, and it's times like these that we have to demonstrate love and um, you know, the connections with family and stuff like that. Because God
Mhm.
forbid something happened to someone, you don't want to be in a position where you haven't been able to talk to them or something like that, as well.
And we all are. We're all inherently much more afraid of loss than we are of gain.
Mhm. Yeah.
Meaning that we fear loss more than we treasure gain.
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
That's right.
So right, but anyway,
Oh, it's good.
it's an unlimited topic here.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up, but I really appreciate
Okay.
you taking the time with us today, sharing some thoughts and some insights, and just a nice conversation with you. So, if yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I sincerely wish you, Tyler, and the girls all the best, and stay in touch. I do periodically check into your YouTube channel, because I'm curious as to know exactly where you are and what's happening.
Well,
So I will periodically check in, and yeah, I think it's great. And the people that follow you now probably, again, this is an opportunity as well. In these situations, your travel experiences can have a multiple positive factor here. There are many areas that you are experiencing which will really help in this particular situation.
Yeah, I mean, when we create our videos, they're always about travel and more from a touristic standpoint. Here's what you can see and do when you come here. Here are some of the top attractions and the fun things, and we show that. So we don't always showcase what are the locals going through. In some countries we do, but it's not our main focus. So now it might be an opportunity to show that some of that side of things and what people are going through. And we are connecting with different people in different countries right now to do interviews to see, what they're going through. And so it's good for people to know, right? It's good for people to have an understanding of not just their neighbors and their cities and their country. So yeah.
So listen, thank you very much, Chantal, and please give my best to Tyler.
I will.
And happy travels when it resumes, and
yes.
Lots of pleasure in between.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate it.